how to make an awesome craft foam armored cuff. Okay, so now that we have all the patterns traced onto the foam, it's time to start cutting them out. Now for the more intricate pattern, such as this, you are going to want to get a mat out and use the Xacto knife. You can also use a burning tool, such as this, and it'll give you a little bit easier of a time than the Xacto knife because it obviously gets hot and it'll melt the foam, but sometimes I don't like how the edges turn out with that, and then you have to be really, really careful that you don't accidentally sneeze while you're doing it. Alright, but as you can see, we are going to cut these out, and I've already got started on this piece here, just for time purposes of making this video to where it's not 4 hours long. If I showed this whole process in real time, you guys would be here forever with me and nobody would ever get to the end. So again, we're going to take the Xacto knife, and I do have the mat underneath it. And as you can kind of see over here, what we're leaving and what we're cutting out. Because you do want to leave this middle piece here, because that's going to be kind of your template for setting your spiked pieces on. So let's go ahead and get cutting. I don't think it's really important that everything is exact or precise. I mean, you're gonna have so much detail in your cuff that nobody's really gonna take the time to appreciate all of it. So if you accidentally nick a corner, if it's not perfectly symmetrical, it is okay. Even during contests, I've never had a judge like get out a ruler and ensure that everything is, you know, perfectly symmetrical. I think just visually they look at the overall detail and effort that you put into it. Now obviously if it was like, you know, super wonky or something and you just could tell 100% that you didn't even try to make it symmetrical, then I think they would care. But for small little things like a nicked corner, I wouldn't worry about it. My Xacto knife right now is pretty dull, so it's not cutting very easily. I could get out my hot tool, try to make this a little bit better, but for time's sake, I'm gonna go ahead and continue with the Xacto. Sometimes when your scroll work gets too close together, it just kind of gets like muddled. I don't know. It's a good word for that. Clustered. Alright. So now this is our new detailed piece that's going to end up going on our regular armored piece there. And I will even out these trimmed edges here soon. But as you can see, it's starting to kind of have an actual shape to it. And then we're gonna cut these out. And they look like these awesome pieces here. So we're gonna cut these out next. Start stacking our spikes. Okay, now the interesting thing when we're cutting these out is that you're really wanting to cut right in here towards the black that meets the silver, because you want that space and that definition between the two spiked pieces, as you can see here. So go ahead and cut out all your pieces. You can either do it with the Xacto knife or you can do it with scissors. I like scissors in this case because it's such a difficult straight line to do with the Xacto knife, but I just want to show you really quick exactly how we're cutting that out, and if I do it with the scissors then you can't see me. So we are only cutting to this point here because this line that I have thrown in there is actually just a reference line is cut them and hot glue them back on vertically, just to kind of guarantee that it'll stay up better, because sometimes folding, it'll eventually fold itself back down. So let's continue cutting. Now also, the center line is just a reference line, so don't go crazy, don't go cutting that. So again, you can see how all that space is kind of separating in there. Gives our spikes a little bit of dimension. So it's not just like a plain, you know, cone shape or anything. Okay, so that's cut out. So all you have to do is, you know, finish cutting the rest of them. Meanwhile though, since I do have enough pieces cut out to at least show you the rest of it for time's sake, I'm going to continue moving on, but you will need to cut all your pieces. So, we take our base layer, which is our cuff. We take our first detail layer, and we're gonna match it up from the bottom, and we can always slice off this extra on the top if we need to. We're gonna wanna get that as centered as possible. And again, right now we're just looking at how the pieces fit together, and then from there we're gonna detail them a little. So I want to start this piece, I think, as much down as I can. So like it there. Deciding whether or not I want to put this one up here. And these are not exactly centered. They were references from when I was flipping them over, so don't think they're exact. You can kind of see it's off center there, so just, again, you're kind of eyeballing these 2 points up here and these 2 points here. If you wanted to, you could go back through, fold it, and make sure you actually have an exact center line. Alright, so now the playful part. Do I want to tuck this under here on top of that and kind of stack them like you would see on a spine? Layer them like this. Might be a little messy where it overlaps. Or I can stack them like this to where they're sticking up. Right like that. Always a tough call. Where to place it exactly. But that's the fun part of cosplay. There's no exact right or wrong, and you get to kind of just continue playing with it until you find the spacing that you like, which personally I think I am in love with this. Because it's going to put it a little bit down on the hand here. Let's see if I can do this while it's connected. Yep. So I like it because it's going to put it a little onto the hand, and it gives it a little flare up near the elbow. So let's play with that for a second. Kind of have to envision what it's going to be like once these edges are folded. And yes, this really is a process that goes through my brain. I just play with it until I find something that I like, and I can either add more details, I can take away details, put more pieces, less pieces, etc. because there is no right and no wrong. The only thing wrong is if you don't love what you're doing. If you're doing something just because somebody else tells you to, if somebody says, oh hey, you know, you would look really fantastic as Batgirl, but you know, for some reason you've always hated Batgirl, because any reason you can come up with. But let's say you hated her and somebody tells you to do it. You don't want to do it just because they think it's cool. So that's the only time cosplay can be wrong. As long as you love it, it's perfect. So again, that's what it looks like. A little 3D raised, I am gonna go ahead and cut them and hot glue them back to where they stay a little more vertical. And you do have to imagine that it's obviously not going to be laying flat, so it looks a lot cooler when it starts bending and the details make more sense. So let's stack and detail. Okay, so now that we're done, of course, you know, playing around and rearranging everything and making sure that it's gonna kind of be the look we're going for, now we can do the detailing. So to start with the detailing, I am taking my base layer and my first detail layer and obviously heating up my hot glue gun. It's really important that you use the high temp hot glue because low temp hot glue has a tendency to, let's just say, melt whenever it is left in your car and your car's in the sun, or if you're in costume for 6 hours in a room with 70,000 people at Denver Comic Con. Either way, you are gonna get quite warm. Low temp is just not gonna cut it, so you do want a high temp hot glue gun. They make some bigger industrial size ones. I don't really need that much hot glue, so I just use a little mini. Obviously my hot glue gun has seen better days. But I am waiting for that to warm up real quick. And while I was kind of plugging that in and getting ready to show you the detail part, I found these really cool scraps from when I was cutting out my spike pieces. And so what I'm thinking about doing with those is actually bringing them down here to the base, or to the wrist cuff area. And then that way, when my spikes are laid on top of it, I have kind of a spiky detail at the top and the bottom, and it would kind of look like this cool little, almost like, you know, kind of like it's surrounding my hand, and little spikes are coming out of my wrist. So that way, if you think about pictures, because I know not everybody thinks about how their costume looks in pictures, but like for me, let's say I wanted to do some kind of like cool monster claw, you know, because I was imitating Nicole Marie Jean. I was like, you know, kind of thing. I've got some nice spikes coming out beside my hand for the picture, and it makes it look cooler. So yeah, I've got these nice little remnants from when I cut out these other spike pieces. So I have now made a template for that, and it will be included for download as well. So you will have all the pieces that I have today to make your wrist cuff if you want to. Otherwise, you can use these same techniques and same thoughts and theories to create your own. You don't necessarily have to use my design. So, taking these back off, coming back down to my first detail layer, hoping my glue is almost warm enough. Might possibly be. We can check it out. If it's not, you guys will never know because it'll be a time lapse. So it is indeed. So the first thing you want to do is just tack it on there. A lot of people, like, for whatever reason, they don't think about the fact that hot glue dries really fast. And I'll admit, I think in the beginning I did the same thing too, which is that I'd flip this piece over and I'd just start hot gluing away, not a care in the world, and I'd get the whole thing covered in hot glue, and then I'd flip it back over and try to stick it to a piece. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's cooled off now. I just wasted like an entire glue stick. Oops. So now I actually tack it down first. Crazy thing. And then I kind of just pull it back here, run a layer, tack it down. Yeah, granted it takes longer, but you are more likely to have a very good bond that is actually going to stay. And again, you're using high temp, not low temp. So if you do happen to have one of those glue guns that can do both, please remember to put it on high. Last thing you want is to make a foam costume and then it falls apart on you while you're at the convention. Because though it is easy to have an emergency repair kit with you, sometimes finding a free outlet is a little more difficult, especially if you're changing your car at the convention for some reason. I swear I never do all the time. But the other thing is some conventions actually charge you for electricity. So just don't count on having hot glue while you're there. So again, it's just best to be prepared and try to make your costume as secure as possible, or then carry things that don't require electricity, like super glue. Super glue does not require electricity, most of the time at least. Because if you need to like grind it off your fingers, it might. So, nice slow process. But like I said, keeps the glue from getting cold fast, which means a better bond. And it's okay if you do things like I just did, which is, you know, get glue up there and I'm like trying to peel it off. As long as it's mostly flat enough, then you shouldn't see it too much. And the plasti dip that you're gonna have to coat this in, because it is a foam, the plasti dip that you coat it in will cover that. Alright, so now that I got the main piece on there, then I can come back through and do all my details. I just have the hot glue trails everywhere. Oh, the hot glue strings. So now that we have our first detail layer on there, now we can add more detail to our first detail layer. We're going to accomplish that by using the burn tool, which I've had heating up now for a little bit, and I have it on its highest setting. If you are newer to using a burn tool, if you've never watched the live video of me doing it, it burns really fast when it's on the full heat because it is just super thin 2mm foam. So feel free to dim down the dial, if you will. You know, put it on a nice yellow, orange, even light yellow setting and just take a little bit longer to go through. I detail really fast because I'm kind of used to doing it a lot. So the hot setting's fine for me because it just allows me to just move. But if you really want to think about it, if you're trying to get precise details instead of just doing kind of like scrolly work, dial down the setting. Otherwise you're going to burn holes through your foam pretty quickly. Okay, since the wood burning tool, which is a Walnut Hollow brand, since that is now heated up, we can do our detail layer, or details on our first detail layer. So I am literally just going to come through, and like I said, it's super quick because it is really hot. So do not press very firmly if you're using the hottest setting.